Now, joining me, as he does each and every week, is Sky News Australia's media watchdog columnist, Gerard Henderson. Now, Gerard, I don't know how you have time to run the Sydney Institute and find all of this, but we spoke last week about the marketing team promoting some of the Teals political candidates. We're in the middle of an election and they're putting out ads for Q&A, but really it's just promoting Teals politicians. You've found another one and we're going to play the grab now.
Across the campaign, across the country, the ABC's sharpest political minds will keep you informed every step of the way.
From housing to health, energy to immigration.
We'll ask the tough questions you want answered.
What happens then? The prices go up?
How are you going to do that? Why can't you explain how you're going to do it?
We'll cut through the spin.
Well, what can you tell me about that?
Well, Anthony Albanese did not get a tough question, he got a simple question. But Peter Dutton got told he didn't know what he was talking about, he couldn't explain his policies. So what Sarah Ferguson is basically saying to Dutton, you've got it all wrong. And what David Speers is saying to the Prime Minister is, well, where does this go with that? I mean, that was a reasonable question. So the ABC is promoting its coverage by demonstrating that it's unprofessional and unfair to the opposition leader who's contesting to be Prime Minister. I mean, it's quite a scandal because, as you know, last week we discussed the promotion for Q&A, as you mentioned, and that was favouring Monique Ryan and Zoe Daniel, both of whom are Teals in Melbourne in marginal seats because their margins aren't very high, those two. So they get, and again last Monday they were still doing this, still running this ad for Q&A, but it's really an ad for the Teals because, as you know, there are about 14 independent members in the House of Representatives, so how come it's the Teals that get up? And again, this favouritism is going on. Again, this morning, Zoe Daniel appeared for no reason on Radio National Breakfast, ostensibly to discuss AUKUS, the submarine deal, but then has asked questions about her own electorate, whether she will win or not, and whether she likes the coalition's policy on vehicle emissions, and the answer is she doesn't. Quell surprise, you know. So this is very unprofessional, and the new ABC management should be doing it, but no one seems to do anything there because it's what I call a Soviet and no one runs it. I mean, the staff run themselves. And
and there perhaps is more scrutiny on an editorial team when to make sure that they're not, even though we have found countless examples of them not necessarily doing the right thing with objectivity and sharing of time. But perhaps their marketing team needs to get a bit of a refresher on some of these rules. And the other thing, I think this is really quite bad because what is happening is the taxpayer is funding an advertising campaign in the middle of a political election for political candidates. And when you think, and that's what it is, and when you think about it like that, it's quite rotten.
I mean, if Sarah Ferguson was saying, well, if David Speers had been saying to the Prime Minister what Sarah Ferguson said to the opposition leader, you'd say, well, that's balanced. But it's not at all balanced. So what they do with the ABC, as you know, they basically balance out the time that people are appearing, but they're not balancing out looking at what has actually been said to air by their own journalist.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to another grab, this time by Sally Sara, someone we regularly discuss on this segment, talking to Jacinta Price,
On the issue of immigration, the opposition leader said yesterday the coalition would reduce net overseas migration by 100,000 people per year. Business groups have said that could have a detrimental effect on industries and the economy. Are those warnings a cause for concern?
So that's how he talks to Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, but how does she talk to Richard Marles?
Minister, just finally on a separate issue, the Coalition has pledged to set up 2 new future funds and scrap Labor's funding vehicles for Rewiring Australia, the Housing Australia Future Fund and the National Reconstruction Fund. Is that a good move, given that we found out in Senate estimates that no new homes have been built yet under HAF?
Gerard.
Well, Sally Sara asked the Deputy Prime Minister whether the opposition's policy is a good move, and quell surprise, the Deputy Prime Minister says, no, it's not. So, I mean, you would never imagine that. But then when she asked Senator Jacinta Price a question, she directs Senator Price to criticism of the opposition's policy and asked her to reflect on that. So these questions followed each other. I mean, they came together. So, I mean, this is just completely unbalanced. So you've got to you should be asking Senator Price the same kind of question that you're asking Richard Marles, and that didn't happen.
It'd be interesting to know what Price thinks of the opposition's policy then, if that's how you ask the question, although I do think that you should ask the candidates about their own policy as a, primary point. But you've got another story here with Nikki Savva, Laura Tingle. Now, obviously, in Sunday we've got Insiders and Spearsy hosts it, and it's the political show. But you've got these two people that are very hostile towards the coalition who keep making these return appearances. What do you think?
Well, Laura Tingle and Nikki Savva are what I call Peter Dutton antagonist. They're antagonistic to the Liberal Party. They're happy to have a Liberal Prime Minister if it's someone like Malcolm Turnbull, but they're not happy if it's someone like John Howard or if it's someone like Peter Dutton. So they're antagonistic. Now, my problem with that is that on the first week of the campaign, Laura Tingle was on, and the second week of the campaign, Nikki Savva was on. There are other people on the panels, but these are really antagonistic people towards Peter Dutton. But there's no antagonistic person towards the Labor Party ever on the program. There's not even a well-known Labor Party critic. I mean, a sort of a reasonable kind of critic, let alone an antagonist. I mean, I don't know anyone in the press gallery who's an antagonist of Anthony Albanese, but I mean, there are some critics of him. But people like Nikki Savva and Laura Tingle are on the record as saying very hostile comments over many years about Peter Dutton, but they get on as if they're just like some sort of independent observer out of the Canberra press gallery. So again, the panels are not balanced with any force, and you see it. I mean, there were many instances where Ms Tingle and Ms Savva had a go at Dutton, and just goes on. Well, Sally, Nikki Savva's also in the 9 newspapers as well. I mean, you read her stuff on the Thursday. It was evident what she was going to say on the Sunday, and she did what she expected her to do, which is basically criticise Dutton. I mean, there's nothing Peter Dutton could do that would be praised by Laura Tingle or Nikki Savva except possibly resign.
Yeah, I do think that we've got a problem in our industry with journalists in general, on average, being left-leaning. And to the degree at the ABC where you probably want to work there if you are left-leaning. And so I do think they've got a difficult... I'm sympathetic as well with management because they're probably not turning away young journalists that have conservative views. They're probably just not getting many of them that apply coming out of the universities and everything as well.
Well, that is true, but you can try harder, and certainly on panels they can get people in, but they don't. I mean, a number of people are just silenced by the ABC. I mean, myself included, I don't really care. But there are many people like that who are outsiders who don't get on programs, partly because the journalists object and also the audience objects, because the ABC has lost so many of their conservative audience that they're basically with a left-wing audience, and the left-wing audience is intolerant of any kind of opposing views. So they then get caught up in this. So you've just got an atmosphere, I call it a conservative-free zone, where even I know people within the ABC who don't agree with a lot of the stuff, but they tell me they won't do it. They won't do it privately or publicly because they're worried about their positions there. I keep their confidences. I don't tell people who they are, but I know quite a few.
That is a massive cultural issue that they need to address. Gerard Henderson, thank you so much for your time, as always.